Hi, everyone. My name is Joe Lee. I'm a volunteer from the ACOFP National Student Executive Board. I'm excited to participate in this session with you. Tonight's session is a talk titled All the Places You'll Go. So we'll be talking about the process, covering of information, and frequently asked questions about applying to family medicine programs, especially in today's virtual age. So I have the pleasure to introduce you to three resident physicians who are members of the ACOFP Resident Council. So the first person is Dr. Ian Singer. He's a PGY2 resident. He attended Nova Southeastern University, Dr. Kiran Patel College of Osteopathic Medicine. He's currently in Brownward Health at Fort Lauderdale, and he's also serving as the chair of the ACOFP Resident Council. So the next person is Dr. Athena Hajianidis. She's a PGY1 resident. She attended Oklahoma State University College of Osteopathic Medicine in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Her current residency program is OSU Cherokee Nation Family Medicine Residency in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. She's currently serving as the vice chair of the ACOFP Resident Council. The next person, our last person, definitely not the least, is Dr. Jordan Wong. He is PGY1 resident. He attended University of Pikesville, Kentucky College of Osteopathic Medicine. His current residency program is Sampson Regional Medical Center at Campbell University. He's serving as one of the members of the ACOFP Resident Council. So with ado, I'll just dive right into the questions. We prepared a couple questions that we have for our resident panel. So I'm going to start off with Dr. Singer and just basically give us a couple of resources on sort of like how do we research residency programs? What are some resources out there?
So there's a number of ways you can research residency programs. The AAMC has a site with database and listing of different programs you can look at. The AAFP has a guide for student applicants to look through as well. You should also be going through your medical schools. Your graduate education offices should have databases for you there as well. There's also good old Google searching, which is something I did a lot of when it came to researching residency programs, especially in the regions that I was interested in. There's another really helpful source is called FRIDA, that's hosted by the AMA. It gives a listing of several residency programs in the country. It talks about CONLEX minimums, average GPAs, etc., size of residency programs, if graduates have degrees. Another really helpful one, the AAMC has a document called the Law of Diminishing Returns. It tells you the statistics for each specialty that you're applying to, and how many applications you should be sending out for residency. There's this theory that if you some statistical analysis that if you send out too many applications, you might be less likely to receive interviews. Something that's beyond my understanding, but I found that very fascinating. So there's a lot of resources at your fingertips. Take advantage of them. Definitely, this is a big decision for you. So investigate thoroughly.
Great, thank you for that. So, I'm going through this process. So I'm looking over almost 600 programs out there. So, Athena, I'm going to go direct this question to you. With so many programs to choose from, how do you narrow down and just sort of like apply and decide which one to interview at?
So I think that question is really personal for each person. To kind of weigh what's most important to them for residency. For me, it was kind of location and then as well as fit with the residents and the specific program. For other people, it may be the opportunities for fellowship afterwards or the opportunities for research. So what I would encourage you to do, and any other student that's applying right now, is kind of look at what you want to gain from your residency and what your goals would be for those couple of years. If you're going into family medicine, what are your goals for the next 3 years? And then what are your goals for after that? There's research out there that shows that many graduates end up staying within a certain radius of where they train for their residency after residency as well. And so consider where you want to be after your training and where you'd like to start your practice after residency. For me, I only applied to programs within Oklahoma because I was interested in staying in Oklahoma due to family. So that narrowed me down to, I think we had 13 or 14 family medicine programs in my state. And then further from there, I thought, well, the application process gives you 10 applications to programs for the same flat rate cost, and then each additional program is an additional cost for you to apply. At least it was 2 years ago when I went through the process. And so when I was a student in ACOFP, one of the lectures that we received was apply to 11 programs, which kind of goes back to that law of diminishing returns that Ian mentioned. And so that kind of narrowed down my choice for me. For each person, it's going to be different. If you're interested in further specializing after residency, you'll likely end up applying to more programs. If you're interested in doing any sort of like a dual or fellowship, that would likely increase the number of programs that you apply to, just based on your own interests.
Great, awesome. Hey, Jordan, do you have anything to add just from that topic of choosing a residency? Anything from your personal experience?
So it's definitely a personal decision. It's less about trying to get in well, partially trying to get in somewhere, but really trying to determine where you want to see yourself in the next couple of years. Questions about what kind of family life you want, just location you want to live in. So I would say there's a lot more personal questions to ask yourself about what you want your life to look at, in addition to what kind of training you want. But mostly the question about where to go is largely a personal one.
Got it. Thank you. So I'm going to continue off with you, and we're going to go right into our next topic of different acronyms. So we have first one was ERAS. I didn't know anything about it until I started submitting my letter of recommendation. So what is ERAS? And I guess do all residency programs use this platform?
So ERAS, I've heard it a million different ways. Stands for the Electronic Residency Application Service. It's the service that I would say the vast majority of residencies use. A couple of different ones include the San Francisco match, which is for neurological surgery, ophthalmology, and they coordinate plastics as well. In addition to that, there is the urology match for those interested in urology. And then sort of outside of specialty specific matches, there's the military match, of course, for military residencies, and obviously open majority of time to military applicants, but there's a couple who take civilian applicants. But the grand majority, pretty much the service that everyone is more or less going to use, is ERAS.
Okay, so the next question is, I'll direct this to you, Ian. What makes a strong ERAS application? Like what are some criteria do you think that makes a candidate a strong candidate?
Sure. So right now I'm finishing my second year of residency. So this is actually my second year that I've been taking part in evaluating resident applications to my program. So things that I look for first and foremost as a family medicine resident, I want to see that the applicant is genuinely interested in the field of family medicine. They've shown a pattern through their medical school career of interest in family medicine, whether that's through membership and involvement with the ACOFP, the AAFP, their state family physician society. that's very important to me. That family medicine is a very intensive field that requires a lot of passion. In addition to our broad medical knowledge, we must have good bedside manner and really care about compassionate healthcare delivery. So to me, that's first and foremost. For me as well, I don't look at grades or board scores, that the program directors do that. So what I look for next is I go to, usually when I review an application, I go to the letters of recommendation next. So I will look to see who wrote the letters of recommendation for the applicant. Was it somebody who's involved in academic medicine, who works with residents often? I mean, works with medical students often? Is it somebody who also works with residents? I look to see if the letter looks like it was personalized, or if it was some boilerplate letter of recommendation where it looks like they plugged and chugged, just put the person's name in there, said this person is a good candidate for your residency program. Lastly, I will sit and read through the personal statements in the ERIS application. This is the time where an applicant can really show who he or she is, what they're all about, what their motivation was to go into medicine, what their motivation was to go into family medicine specifically. I look for interesting stories, unique stories, somebody who has experienced different things, who brings some interesting life perspective, personal history to the program. And at that point, I form a view in my head before I go ahead and interview the applicant. So really those things that I alluded to are what typically catch my eye when I'm reviewing ERIS applications for a family medicine residency.
Great, thank you so much for that. That was very helpful. So Athena, I'll direct this question to you. If an applicant has a red flag, like a failed board score or a failed course, how do you recommend to sort of like addressing that in the ERIS application?
Yeah, so I think that every applicant is going to have an area of their application that they feel like is not as strong as the other areas. And I think when we talk about red flags, that means something different to every person. So a red flag could be something as drastic as a failed board score, but it could also be that you made straight A's in med school and you got 1B or you got 1C. To that person, that's the area of their application that's the most deficient. It could be that you didn't do any research or weren't as involved in extracurriculars. So I think when it comes to addressing those, both in your interview and your application, I think the application will kind of speak for itself and your transcript, or when you submit your, is it your MBOME transcript? And so it's more going to come up in your actual interviews. So what I would do is in your interview, be prepared to respond to questions about those deficiencies, whether it's a board score or a grade, but also be prepared to address them and take control of the narrative if it doesn't come up in your interview. And what I mean by that is you may get to the end of your interview and your interviewer asks you, do you have any questions for us, or is there anything else that I can answer? And there's two different ways that you can go about that. You can say, are there any areas of my application that you had concerns about or raised red flags for you that I can address at this time? Or you can say, there is an area of my application that I would like to further address if you have a few minutes or if you have a few moments. And then take control of what area you feel you were deficient in, why you feel like you were deficient in that area, and what you learned from that experience. And I think taking control of the narrative for whatever that deficiency could be prevents your interviewer from kind of guessing about what might have happened and creating their own story in their head as to what may have gone wrong for you. So keeping all of those things in mind, I think would be most beneficial. As far as your actual application goes, if it's something that was major or drastic, let's say that you failed your boards multiple times, and let's say that you missed a year of med school or completed med school and an additional year because of a medical reason, I would address something that severe or that large in your actual application, either in your personal statement or in another area of the application, just to make sure that a program doesn't look at that one area and say, we're not going to interview this person because of that. It kind of gives you the opportunity to address it beforehand.
Thank you for that. Jordan, the next question is, what is VSAS? I'm going through this and I'm applying, submitting application, and I'm trying to make sense of everybody's application and the rotation and audition rotation. So can you just explain a little bit about VSAS and maybe just touch on how many audition rotation should we apply to, and different advice that you would provide for students who are going through this process?
So while I didn't use VSAS myself, so take all of this as more superficial information. So obviously VSAS is the Visiting Student Application Service. It's the application of the VLSO or VSLO, the Visiting Student Learning Opportunities, basically how you go about applying for audition rotations in a fairly standardized way. Now, I want to add a caveat that this isn't the only method of getting an audition rotation. Some residencies, hospitals don't even use it at all. And they're a little more, in a sense, informal, and would rather that you just reach out to their GME coordinator and work out a rotation that way. But for a lot of the larger academic institutions, they'll tend to use VSAS. In terms of how many, that's again kind of a more personal question. I think the best use of an audition rotation is exactly that, to audition at a residency that you want to go to. Alternatively, some people might use it just to rotate at a bigger place that you may not get to rotate in medical school. I will say, from the side of interviewing applicants, I like applicants that I've seen before, that I've talked to, that I know what their work ethic is, or conversely, what their work ethic isn't. So I definitely would recommend people pursue them. They're not for everybody, and they do have their costs. But how many you decide to go with ultimately just really depends on kind of how wide of a net you want to cast for residency, or what you just want to learn on your own.
Yeah, thank you for that. Does anybody have any experience with VSAS or applying via VSAS that want to chime in by any chance?
Yes, so I applied to some programs through VSAS. It's one of those standardized websites that you go into. A lot of programs make themselves available to auditioning students through. So for example, there was a few programs that I applied to that were VSAS. The applications can vary for each program. I remember some may have asked for a small personal statement, others asked for resume, others asked for my COMLEX level 1 score. It's a mini application process to apply to apply to get audition rotations. Like Jordan said, though, it's not the only way to get auditions. He was able to do so outside of VSAS. I was able to as well. And some programs don't, as far as I know, do not participate in the VSAS. So if there's a program you're interested in and you don't see them on the website for VSAS, go to that program's website, try to see if there's contact information, if there's email, send an email to the program coordinator. If need be, pick up the phone and call. You obviously don't want to be too much of a nuisance. People are busy, but certainly if there's a program that you're interested in, reach out. I was able to obtain a couple of auditions through direct contact to programs that were not in VSAS.
Yeah, thank you for both of you for those answers because I'm applying it right now at this time and I'm only directly applying to residency program. I haven't touched visas at all currently, but it's good to know that there's these resources out there and visa and different application process to go through. So Ian, I'll just continue with you. What is NRMP? Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
So 2 words, the match. So NRMP stands for National Resident Matching Program. So this is the last leg of the race. The NRMP, the match is the standardized manner in which programs and applicants rank one another, and eventually through match day, applicants rank and match into residency programs. So it's a computer-based system. Let's say you interviewed at 10 programs, you decided you really liked 7 of them, and you are going to rank 7 of them. So when the day comes to submit your rank order list, ROL, I believe is one of the nicknames for it, you list the order of programs through the NRMP website that you are interested in matching with your first rank number 1, the program you want to be with the most. In turn, the residency programs will rank applicants. It could be 10 applicants they'll rank. They could be ranking 100 applicants. Residency programs will rank the applicants in the order that they like the applicants. So let's say you are applying to program A and you really want them, you rank them number 1 on their list. The program A is accepting 5 new members of their class. If you rank them number 1 because they're your favorite choice and they rank you in their top 5, you will match to that program. I think they described it as like a snaking match. There are videos on YouTube that explain it much more eloquently than me. But that's the NRMP. It's the standardized system through which you match into programs. Now, there are people who don't match into programs through the regular NRMP match, and still through the NRMP system, they can apply through the SOAP. It's the supplemental offer acceptance program, and that I kind of analogize that to essentially like free agency in sports. You weren't drafted by a team through the match, but you'll get access to a list of programs that didn't fill their class, and you can apply directly to those programs that still have opening. And then you can match that way, still being part of the NRMP match. So it's complicated, but that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Again, as with anything, I encourage anybody who's going to be going through the match in the next year to definitely look it up and read about how the match algorithm works through the computer system. It's pretty interesting. It's stressful, but yeah, I encourage you definitely to look into it.
The one thing I wanted to add on to that is depending on how old the resource you're using is, even some web pages of major organizations are still not quite up to date. You may come across some terminology, the AOA match or the osteopathic match. It was a match for DOs exclusively that used to exist, but was gradually phased out over the last 5 years, with the last of it being 2019 match. As of 2020, it's no longer used. So the only matching service that we use now is the NRMP combined ACGME match. So if you do see AOA or osteopathic match, it's just something we don't use anymore.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that's helpful because, more acronyms But Athena, how much do you recommend students, try to budget applying to and sort of interviewing for residency? That's always something that we're always struggling with as medical students.
So I think when it comes to budgeting, I did not do a great job at that, and didn't really pre-plan for it. Going into my 4th year of medical school, I requested an additional $5,000 of financial aid for that academic year, knowing I wasn't taking out the full amount that I could each year prior to that. And the reason that I chose $5,000 was because I was interested at the time in doing a month audition rotation at a program out of state that I would have had to have all of the expenses for my travel and then for my housing and stay while I was there. So it wasn't so much that I was concerned about the actual application itself. It wasn't that I was concerned about paying my ERAS fee or my fees to the MBOME. It was more so that I was factoring in that I was interested in traveling for my application season. And so I think students that are interested in doing that may want to sit down and really calculate costs a little bit more closely. But for students that are interested in like local auditions or planning on virtual interviews, which is difficult to know ahead of time, but planning on interviews that they could either drive to and not have to spend lots on lodging and travel for, it likely won't add up to thousands of dollars. I think in total, given that I didn't travel out of state, I probably spent just under $1,000 on all of my applications and interviews. So that said, to kind of break it down, the NRMP itself requires $85 to register for up to 20 programs, and then there's an additional cost to rank any program above that. When I went through, I think that it was 10 programs through ERAS, and that requires a $99 fee for you to submit your actual ERAS application to those programs. So again, it's worth that additional cost, but if you're considering, oh, I think I only want to apply to 5 programs, it's not going to hurt you financially to go ahead and find another 5 programs that kind of fit the type of program that you're looking for and cast your net to those programs as well, because you won't be paying any additional fee for that. VSAS and VSLO has a fee associated with it, but not everybody will be using that. And then also use your actual medical school as a resource to talk about if they cover any of those fees, because some schools do and some schools don't.
Great, thank you. Moving on to the next session, we're going to talk about virtual interviewing. And I guess everyone should sort of like chime in for this. How did virtual interviewing sort of differ from in-person interviewing for you guys? I don't know if you had the personal experience of virtual interviewing or have the personal experience of interviewing applicants virtually. Can you guys speak a little bit more to that?
So I interviewed in person for all my interviews back early 2020. But then on the flip side, I've done all the interviewing virtually. So from in-person kind of standpoint, the one thing you miss out on when you virtually interview is obviously being there, seeing the facility, seeing the people, seeing the atmosphere, or feeling the atmosphere. But on the flip side, one of the things I like, and actually our program really enjoys about virtual interviewing, is one, it gives us a lot more individual time per applicant. We split it up where I think they get an hour with 30 minutes with each of our program directors, and then 30 minutes with residents. And with the residents, it's just more about getting to know us getting to know them. They can ask any question they want about the program. So while they miss out on seeing the program and being there in person and kind of getting the wine and dine experience, I think they do benefit from one-on-one questions. And especially when you're trying to determine like how's housing and those little questions that might get buried in a large group, that's more beneficial. So kind of there are a lot of pros and there's some cons. I think moving forward, our program wants to hold on to virtual interviewing as long as possible. But with the way, with hopefully eventually moving past COVID, kind of who knows what the future has in store.
I think our program kind of did all virtual official interviews this year. But one of the things that was a little bit different for us is the students that came out and rotated with us and auditioned with us, that really served as more of an interview than even their virtual interviews. So they still came out and they did their virtual interview, but it was really nice to have them get to rotate through like our resident clinic. They spent a week just working with each and every one of us that's in the program. So at that point, by the time that we got to virtual interviews, everybody was like, oh, I know Athena, I've worked with her. And that speaks louder than how you respond to a question in an interview, I feel like. But we still did offer that to our auditioners. For the students that were out of state, the thing that I think you miss out on or lack is kind of how well you gel and mesh with the residents in the program. And for me, that was one of the biggest deciding factors for where I wanted to go to residency. I knew that wherever I went, I could kind of make my experience what I wanted to make of it. As far as educational wise, you can dedicate as much time to your education. But if you end up at a program where you just don't fit in with the people or you don't mesh with the environment, it makes for a very difficult 3 years of residency. So I would take it upon yourself if a program doesn't offer in-person interviews or you don't have an opportunity to rotate with a program that you are very seriously considering, to try to reach out potentially to some of the residents or to the program and say, hey, I can't come out and do a full audition, but if it's somewhat local, maybe you can go spend a couple days with them if that fits into your schedule. Or maybe you can talk about contacting some of their residents and asking questions about the culture of the program and the residency.